Chu Niman Artunzye Kwaelu. Happy Children's Day for everyone, my little friends in China. I wish you many, many wonderful adventures and keep enjoying books and stories.
Could you please tell us what is the inspiration of writing this Uncle Leo's series?
Actually, to be honest, it all happened by mistake. I didn't plan to write a children's book. I was just trying to help my brother. He has 7 kids. So a few years ago, he had only 5 kids. And one of them was just a little baby. Parents work very, very hard. And I offered my babysitting services. I told him, yes, and I'll come one evening, I'll stay with your kids, and you and your wife can go, to the movies or whatever, just relax a little bit, take a break. And I came, and I was appalled to see that one of my nieces was crying, no, no, no. She didn't want her parents to go, but they went because they didn't want to be late to the movies. But then I tried to explain to her, listen, they will come back, but she kept, no matter what I told her. She kept on crying, but then I found myself saying, do you want to hear how Uncle Leo got stuck on a cloud and up in the sky? And then she was like, yes. And she stopped crying, and I had to tell her a story. I didn't plan to tell her a story, but I had to improvise a story. So I improvised the whole adventure of Uncle Leo getting, how he got stuck on a cloud. And she was very happy, and also her sisters and brothers, they enjoyed the story. And the next time I came for a visit, they just demanded a new adventure. And then gradually I found myself telling them all kinds of adventures, how Uncle Leo turned into a cockroach, and how he reached the land of chocolate, and how he turned into half man, half woman. And actually all Uncle Leo's adventures are first improvised, or you might say they are created while I tell them to kids in my family. And then I write them in books, because the first inspiration is that, to me, is sitting with kids and telling stories. Because when I sit with kids, I must tell a very interesting story. Because if I don't, they just go away. So I must tell a story. But then, I don't tell stories that the kids wish to listen. I don't think, what, I don't ask myself, what do they want to hear now? I tell stories I wish to tell. I tell stories about my fears, about my dreams, about things that make me angry or make me confused. I search deep in my heart to find the stories I want to tell, and then I tell it in a manner kids can relate to it. And actually all Uncle Leo's adventures are, you might say, very biographical, in the sense they tell something about my emotions. And I think this is the main reason they are meaningful to other people. Because when even I talk to you, it's a kind of dialogue. And if I just talk to you about the weather or something like that, it will be a small talk. But the moment I tell you something about myself, really about something about myself, it will be meaningful.
Yeah, sure. And as husband and a father, does your family give you any inspiration of writing these kind of stories?
Yeah, sure. You see, I have my own daughters, and we play together. And for example, my daughter talks with me about how she loves sweets and desserts, and so I tell her about this rat that wanted to eat, and it happens all the time, actually. And actually my next book that will be published in Israel and hopefully one day also in China started when I just again improvised the story to my daughter. We went on a trip, and she was crying, no, I don't want to, whining, yes, I don't want to go walk, I'm tired. And then I tell her, listen, I tell you a story. And I started to tell this story which is based on my father's very poor childhood. It's about a child that is very, very poor, and how he copes with this kind of conditions. And so it's kind of a very daily dynamics that happens all the time, because my daughters love stories, I love stories. So yeah, they give me much inspiration, of course. The new book, it's a new series a new book series I start about a kid, because I saw that my daughter, she lives in a very, like a nice house, everything is okay, she's not hungry, she gets a good education, good health services. And when I started to tell her about a kid that doesn't have anything, all the things she when she looks around her, it doesn't have it, all the gadgets and all the things. So she was fascinated, because for her it was like fantasy, but a real fantasy, because she realized some kids do live such a life. And I discover it is fascinating also for her. So I follow this story. But then in Uncle Leo's Adventures, of course, I tell her also Uncle Leo's Adventures.
So what messages are you going to convey in your books?
First of all, I feel that writing for children is really enormous responsibility, enormous, because you see, if I'm a teacher in school, so I'm responsible for 1 class, 2 classes, 3 classes. But I write books, and now they reach China, and they reach Japan, and they reach Korea, and of course Israeli kids. So the things I write reach so many kids, so I have really great responsibility. But then I really feel that true literature or good literature is all about honesty. So it's not that I think about a message and then I think about a story that will convey the message, but I just tell stories. And while telling the stories, I realize there are some messages and meanings hidden in them. And after I read the story or write, because I tell it first and then I write it, when I write it down, so I again realize and find all kinds of meanings. And it's very, it's actually, it's very natural, because, all the messages and meanings are inside me. For example, I really dislike violence. Yes, I think people should try to be non-violent in their, private life and even in their public life. And Uncle Leo, for example, he solves all these, challenges and problems in a non-violent manner. Now, even if some monster wants to eat him, or some demon wants to kill him, or fry him in a pan or whatever, so he solves his problems differently. And that, he must be very creative, because taking a gun, this is not creativity, yes. He must be very creative, and many times he saves his life with the power of stories. He's kind of like you might say, a superhero that his magic power is stories. And so the moment I tell such a story, such adventures, so there's this message of being non-violent, and there's this message of be creative. Give it a thought and try to find the creative solution to things. So there are all kinds of messages, that they come up while telling the stories.
Do you have any suggestions of how Chinese educators can encourage children's creativity here in China?
Oh, I'm not sure I'm the one to tell Chinese educators what to do, because there are so many circumstances that to be taken in count. But then I can tell you, I teach also in Israel, like in trainings for teachers. It's the same problem also in Israel, or the same challenge in Israel, because usually in schools, when a kid writes something or does something, so he receives some kind of mark or comments or feedback that, some marks, is it A, B, A minus, or all kinds of marks he receives. And creativity is not about marks, yes. And usually when I tell teachers, listen, you must give the kids some time to do things that are not marked. Give the kids some time to, for example, write stories or paint paintings or tell things, and just create some atmosphere for meaningful dialogue. And show the kids, and this is the main thing, that you are interested in what they have to say. Because many times we are interested whether they were right or wrong in what they say, and not with what they really want to say. So the moment I come to a kid and tell him, listen, I want to listen to you. I think you might have important things to tell me, interesting things to tell me, meaningful things to tell me. I think this is, you might say, the basic layer of creativity. Because then you tell the kid, something inside of you should be expressed. You can express it. There's a place for it. There's a space for it. There's someone listening. But creativity is many other things. But then I think meaningful dialogue, put aside the scores, the marks, and the exams, and just find a way to create a free dialogue with kids. Through paintings, through writings, through just, talking together in class.
Have you heard of any Chinese writers on children's literature? And have you done any research into Chinese children's literature here?
Actually, unfortunately, we don't have many Chinese writers for children translated into Hebrew. We have, so one of my missions coming back to Israel is collecting some names and some titles and offer them to local publishing, Israeli publishing houses, because I know many people in the business of publishing houses, and hopefully to bring Chinese writers to Israel, because I think first of all it might open the kids' mind, and I'm sure there are many interesting books. And I saw, I don't know Chinese unfortunately, but I saw also the illustrations are very nice in books. So for sure I'm going to do that and maybe make some little change in that regard.
Definitely, you will have future plans of writing more stories, right?
Of course, I write other stories also. As I said, my next book is not Uncle Leo's Adventures, and in Israel, there's like next year we're gonna have like an Uncle Leo's Adventures play on stage, which has a completely different adventure, like a new adventure. But then again, the official answer is that as long as my family provide me with nieces and nephews, and I provide myself with new kids, and as long as they want to hear the stories and I want to tell them, and surely it's going to be like that. So I will tell Uncle Leo's Adventures, and then I will write them in books. So, and it doesn't seem yet to reaching the end, because I have many nephews and nieces. We're really huge family.
So will your Chinese experience this time provide you some new ideas into your future Uncle Leo series?
Oh yes, in Shujao we visited an underground tomb, like an underground palace for one of the kings there, and this was a fascinating experience. And I can't tell you how it's gonna be combined or influence my writings of Uncle Leo's Adventures, but I am sure it's gonna be somehow it's gonna be there in the stories. But I'm talking about the Tibetan Ocean is not about Tibet actually. It's like just because there's no ocean in Tibet, I'm saying the Tibetan Ocean because Uncle Leo goes on to places that no one can reach. So he goes like to the Swiss desert. So we don't have a desert in Switzerland. So I try to find names that sounds good to Israelis first and sounds that will ignite kids' curiosity. But then in one of the books, book number 5, Uncle Leo dreams a never-ending dream, and he doesn't know whether, eventually doesn't know whether his life is just a dream or whether he's awake or not. And this is for sure influenced by Chuang-Tzu, that dreamt is a butterfly and didn't know whether is a butterfly dreaming is Chuang-Tzu or Chuang-Tzu dreaming is a butterfly, and all this ambiguous state of mind gave me inspiration for the adventure. So sometimes inspiration takes all kinds of forms, but this is for sure a Chinese influence on my writing.
That's marvelous. That's really something we'd like to hear, because I do think by introducing your stories into China, that will benefit kids here in China. And also, there are also many famous writers of children's stories here in China. And if we promote them in Israel and also in other countries, that will bring our Chinese culture to the outside world.